G3 Assistance through Virginia's community colleges is your pathway to a new future. Get a skill. Get a job. Get ahead. Learn more at vccs.edu/G3.
This is a CBC podcast.
We're about 8 minutes now past 5 o'clock. Well, the province is dealing with a fourth wave of COVID-19. 122 new cases were announced this afternoon, and several schools were closed for the day. The Chief Medical Officer of Health also spoke about an outbreak at a Moncton shelter during this afternoon's briefing. Here's Dr. Jennifer Russell.
Public health is very concerned, as am I, with the outbreak at the Harvest House shelter in Moncton. We did have meetings over the weekend about this particular outbreak. There are now 24 active cases at this facility, and a second round of testing will take place today. My understanding is the Prompt team has been working really closely with that organization, and it's going as well as it absolutely can right now, so that is encouraging.
That's Dr. Jennifer Russell at this afternoon's briefing. Trevor Goodwin is the director of the Moncton YMCA's Reconnect Street Intervention Program and other outreach services. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, Trevor, what are your concerns now that there was an outbreak declared just on Friday, 6 cases at that time. Now we're up to 24 cases in total at Harvest House.
Yeah, my concerns are first and foremost for the clients and the staff at Harvest House and people that are working within the community. We want to make sure that everybody is, taking the precautions that are needed and that they're receiving, the care that is there for them. So whether that's, getting a COVID test or needing to isolate or needing to have some sort of housing or other arrangements made for them.
How set up are shelters like Harvest House to deal with this kind of thing, to provide spaces for people to be separate when needed, that kind of thing?
Harvest House is in a very unique position where, Executive Director Mark Beliveau had the forethought to create a isolation space early on in the pandemic right within the shelter. So they have a separate wing that has, private access to, bathrooms, meals, and places to isolate and take care of themselves. So I think they're in a position that's better than a lot of shelters. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to need the assistance from public health and, the government of Brunswick and other community organizations to, help deal with, maybe the overflow of clients or relocating them somewhere.
What do you know about the assistance that's being provided?
I know that, public health has been on site from the get-go, and that they're, they stepped in and stepped up and were, doing testing and providing care for anybody that was there that needed it and helping Harvest House staff and clients, manage that situation. And I know that, community resources are also standing by, so Reconnect is available to assist with people that are in the community, but not necessarily at the shelter, but may, need access to PPE or food or other supplies. So, us along with other agencies are, we're standing by and ready to assist.
How hopeful are you then that this can be, dealt with and navigated? Very hopeful.
As we're so far into a pandemic, to the pandemic that, we've dealt with this in special care homes and schools and other residential facilities and other places. Just because it's a shelter and these individuals are, experiencing homelessness doesn't make it any worse to deal with. In fact, I think it might make it a little bit easier because there's a tight-knit community of resources around them already.
That is certainly the case. And yet this is, everybody is different, of course, but this tends to be a vulnerable population. People often have underlying health conditions that can really put them at risk when they do get something like this.
Definitely. These individuals are, experiencing homelessness, and they're experiencing and suffering from a myriad of other underlying conditions. So they aren't at the strongest that they could be or should be. In our Reconnect program, spent a lot of time during the winter and in the early stages of that pandemic, making sure the clients were, had those immune systems boosted. They had vitamins and resources there to keep their bodies as healthy as possible. And these clients are also, they have access to medical services. They have the Salvus Clinic, they have hospitals, and I think, public health is prepared and has things in place. As I said, we've had a lot of time during this pandemic to prepare for this, for if and when it did happen.
What happens when someone who is homeless or unhoused gets COVID? Are there additional barriers to accessing health care?
That's an interesting question. Someone who's, unhoused or experiencing homelessness is, they're already facing life with continual barriers for everything that they may be, dealing with. But with COVID, the healthcare system has, responded and public health and like they're there, and it's really quite seamless in order to, get your COVID test, get your results, and have those things taken care of. I think one of the barriers that we often don't think of is, especially with COVID-19 testing, that's sort of switched to an online service. And so if clients don't have a telephone or access to an email, then it's really hard for them to, schedule appointments or get those results back. So that's where they start relying on, agencies like Reconnect and outreach teams and other places to sort of act as those middle ground for them. And then we think of isolation. So, where do they go? Are they going to stay in their tent? Are they going to stay in community? Or are we able to assist them and put them in an isolation space or a hotel or somewhere? And then on top of that, we don't, we have to start thinking of their daily lifestyle and, are they someone that uses drugs? And if that's the case, how will that impact their being in isolation for 2 weeks? And what steps can be put in to make their stay comfortable?
How else has the homeless population been affected by the pandemic in ways that people may not realize? I think, early on, so much was closed, and I know that made it really difficult for people to access all kinds of spaces that they would normally have access to. Are there still those issues?
Definitely. I mean, I think for me, that's one of the biggest barriers for people experiencing homelessness and struggling there is not being able to access places. And so, yes, things may have reopened now, but there's restrictions in place. So, loitering, for lack of a better term, isn't allowed in a lot of restaurants or coffee shops or malls. So it's really hard for people to get in out of the elements or have a place to go. A lot of the food banks and meal services are still just at the door. So there's no common places, no places for people to just be social. So that's and that wears on individuals when they're, you're not able to, we've seen it ourselves, going through a pandemic and not being able to see friends or family or do things. And, people who are homeless are no different. So when they're unable to have that social gathering and those connections, then they suffer the same way as other people do.
Listen, thanks so much for your time today, Trevor. Appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.
Trevor Goodwin is with the Moncton YMCA's Reconnect program.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.